Hello everyone and welcome to Metra's monthly update. This is the update for February. I am the chairman and CEO, Derek Boyd, and this is...
I'm Vladimir Sokolov, the president and secretary. So today we're going to this should be a fairly short video. We're going to wrap up kind of what we went over some of the things in January, and then move on to what we have pretty much done for the rest of February and continuing on from there. So let's go on ahead and let's jump right into it. So as you guys remember, we were talking about the unit of 124 where we were holding off on actually finalizing the eviction of it due to the gentleman there potentially working with some kind of charity payment processor and everything else like that. Well, due to our lack of funds and our inability to actually be able to properly get the electric back on through inspections, getting a licensed electrician and so on and so forth, unfortunately, it's too much of a liability to have left the gentleman in there. And so we had to move forward because obviously the charity case didn't come through, so we couldn't have used those funds to dump it back in to try to actually fix it, and it was just too much of a liability. Yeah. There's nothing else to really say on that.
So there's kind of two parts. This is why it was an issue. One is that the charity wouldn't actually give any funds until he could get his electric back on because they had to make sure that he was in a habitable home. We couldn't provide a habitable home because obviously we didn't have the fund. If you remember our budget last month, it was terrible and it didn't get any better this month. So we didn't have the funds to actually get the electric back on, to then get the charity organization to reimburse ourselves, to then provide him a home that he can live in. So it was like a vicious cycle in reverse. And unfortunately, the way it worked out is that not only was it the issue of us not being able to give him a habitable home in time, but it was also the fact that if you remember when we talked about the eviction process, there is a timeline in it. And so we were hitting the deadline of when we could actually do what is like the appointment schedule based thing, which we'll get into in a second, about how we actually do the eviction process. So we would have had to refile the whole thing all over again, which means we would have had to go back into the county, file another $50 or $40 charge with the magistrate, then them come out and bring a server to then tell him he's got 10 days, whatever it was, to actually pay up the now extra back due balance because it's now another month in. And then if he doesn't follow that, then we get the writ of ejectment to then call the county to then do the eviction and set the whole format back up. So this would have just unfortunately delayed the inevitable because we literally couldn't do anything to get him in the home and keep him in the home anyways. So it was either we tried to do other options too, right? I want to clarify. We obviously reached out to a reasonable amount of charity organizations. Unfortunately, we either didn't qualify because we weren't already in some type of charitable situation as well, or we just didn't qualify because we didn't already have licensed situations to work with. So for example, we didn't have any licensed contractors on hand. We didn't already have permits pulled for certain things to get done. We had to get new permits pulled anyways, which once again we didn't have the funds for. It was a whole slew of problems, and so we just didn't have enough to do that. And so some of the things we looked into is instead finding him some displacement programs. So since he's out of his home currently, can we get him into something else temporarily? And I don't know if he ever got anything. We unfortunately, like I said, we legitimately ran out of time. We tried doing as much as we could, and we even let him stay in other people's homes, discounted their rent for a little bit to offset the fact that they had an extra person in there to cover for like electric and water and things. And unfortunately, this is what it is, and we just literally couldn't do anything more.
And what kind of caught both of us by surprise is, I believe this is a Belton City specific thing, but it does deal with the Anderson County Sheriff's Department. So I'm not entirely sure where this lies, because we've seen one eviction before go through on Anderson's side, and it's pretty much what you expect. You have the court hearing. If you fail to provide why you should be able to stay in the home, you get your 48-hour notice or whatever else within that court hearing, and then you get evicted out from there. If you didn't move any of your stuff, all well, it's just considered abandoned. The landlord can throw it out onto the side, and if you pick it up, great. If you don't, after a certain amount of time, he has the right to dispose of it. Man, I swear, like, you learn so much more than you ever wanted to. So the eviction process in Belton works like this. You as the landlord are required to supply 4 people to help move the person out of their home.
4 able-bodied people.
Yeah,
you
4
can't just
able-bodied
randomly 4
people.
It has to be 4 people who are specifically there to do the moving process of gathering the materials and bringing
And
it
the
out.
way that it's structured out is that the tenant themselves are not allowed to move any of their items out. Those 4 people, which you could be the landlord as well, included in that, are to go in there, grab whatever the tenant wants, and put it outside. And you have to put it outside on like this like tapered plastic or whatever else.
We only had to do that because it was raining. So
yeah.
normally you just have to take the property, whatever their personal property is, and take it out and put it outside somewhere that they can access it at a later date. So, for example, if we take all their stuff out, we lock up the house, we aren't barring them entry from their own stuff. The point is to get their stuff out, bring it outside so they can come back and gather it as they need to, or take it now. Problem is that we got out there and it was like the one rainy day of the week, and we had confirmed with the county to make absolutely, specifically the sheriff's department, to confirm that they had the appointment set, that they were still coming through with it because it was raining. We didn't know if it was going to be able to.
And ask if there was anything else we needed to do.
And that's exactly what we followed up with. And they, once again, this is the office lady. This isn't the actual sheriff themselves. So we were dealing with, or deputy or anybody, but this was specifically somebody in the office. They told me, no, everything's fine, everything's on schedule. We then show up to the actual mobile home park to go do the process when we had our 4 people. And the sheriff or the deputy, or whatever he was, I think it was the deputy, he told us that we can't do the actual eviction today, being the day that we were there, because it's raining and we didn't have any type of plastic to cover the person's belongings. And we're like, what the hell do you mean? And he's like, we're going to have to reschedule. And we couldn't reschedule because we were at the deadline. Meaning that if we had to reschedule, it would have been post the deadline and we would have had to refollow the whole process. And we're like, absolutely the hell not. So then, basically...
This is where it just gets absolutely absurd. There's so much liability with all of this, and this is the dumbest process ever. So, in normal evictions, the way that it works is that you go to the eviction court, the judge literally tells the tenant how long they have to get out. You have to understand, the tenant has now already gotten a 5-day notice. They know that they're late if you put in your contract. If you didn't, they potentially gotten a 2-week notice. Then you go and you file the eviction, which takes another potential anywhere between as little as 10 or up to potentially 30 days, depending on how busy the courts are. So now they've got additional 15 to 30 day notice for you to then obviously win, because if they didn't pay, then you're automatically in the right of it. So you win, and then you have to call in, schedule out a time, so they have more time to delay for when the sheriff actually shows up there to enact the court order of the eviction. But then you are required as the landlord to now have to pay to basically move them. That is absurd to me. That makes no sense. And the other thing him and I were talking about, who's responsible? So, let's say we go in there and we sit there and we move their furniture. We damage something of theirs while we're moving it out. They were not allowed to touch it because by the way that the rules work, but if you're following standard operating procedure that we were explained, they aren't allowed to move any of their stuff. So if you go in there and if we break something of theirs or whatever else, who's at fault? Is it us at fault because we're doing exactly what the county is telling us to do? Or is it the county's fault because now somebody broke something doing what the county told them to do? Then you have the other
option. Or the tenant's fault because they should have moved it in advance.
Yeah, they should have moved it in advance.
The whole reason we're here to begin with.
So now, but then you have another issue, right? What about this? What if we're moving something, say him and I are moving out a couch that the tenant said they wanted, I'm coming down the stairs, we slip, couch falls, literally crushes like a disc plate in my spine as I'm falling because I hit concrete and I get the couch hitting me on top. Who's at fault? Is it the county for literally telling me that I had to show up to go and do this and have 4 people to move this thing? Or is it the tenant's fault because it's their property? Who's at fault? This is the biggest liability loophole I've ever seen when it comes to something that should have been very simple and very easy. You know, if you're on your way out the door, you have had ample time and ability to find a new place, make proper preparations, and get everything ready for the move. In this situation, obviously, it was a sad situation because, I'm sorry, we're not going to risk the rest of the park by letting somebody live in a house that has no electricity, and now that could potentially bring even more issues to the rest of the tenants that are already in the park. So it's an unfortunate situation here, but usually it's not. It's a lot more cut and dry. They didn't pay. They knew they needed to get out. They got all the notices about them needing to get out, and then they don't. Yet we have to show up and we have to do this, and it's absolutely insane because once again, the landlord is now paying even more out of pocket for the thing that they're supposed to be able to do. And now there's one other final caveat, right? Because the tenant, by the books, if we're doing it by the books, is not allowed to go in there and move any of their stuff. What if they have a $2,000 PC? And we just say, yeah, I'm sorry, not seeing it, not there. And we just move everything else out, but we leave that $2,000 PC in there. What's to stop somebody from doing that?
Mm-hmm. That was the first thing we thought of is when we were doing this entire process. We're like, if the individual isn't allowed to go into their home and dictate what is exactly theirs, they had to basically just tell the cop, and then the cop basically relays the information to us. We go grab it and bring it out. What's to stop us?
One more thing. The police officer is simply there, not to actually forcefully remove them from the home, but just to literally keep the peace during us having to go in there and move out all the stuff.
Basically, if a fight or something breaks out, then he's just there to stop it. So that's the thing that we laughed at, because we're like, what if we're moving the most common thing, right, that would have money, valuables to it. So you're moving like a dresser, and of course, it's going to be like a jewelry drawer. What's to stop you from just, I don't know, taking all this stuff out of the jewelry drawer, dumping it into a bag, and then taking the furniture outside and being like, we didn't know about any jewelry in the jewelry drawer. We just knew that we had to move the furniture. We don't know what you're talking about. We're just here to do what you told us to take out. So if we need to move the couch, we check under the couch cushion, say there's $100 under there. Take the $100, put the couch cushion back. We don't know what you're talking about. We're just told to move the couch. Same logic, like he was saying too, is that even full-on things that we don't want to even grab. Just be like, we didn't see it in there. We just didn't know where it was. We thought we already got it. Or, for example, we took all the stuff out. The next day, he comes and grabs all of his stuff out the front yard, and then he calls us up and is like, hey, I'm missing my, I don't know, guitar or something. Be like, oh, sorry, we thought we got it for you. Unfortunately, you're not allowed in the house to go get it. Too late, too sad.
I don't understand why they're doing that kind of a process.
There's no check and balance in that at all.
Yeah, there's no check and balance on that. And then on top of it, too, good luck actually ever proving anything if something like that does go right or something like that does happen. Because if the police officer doesn't see anything, they can't do anything. And then the tenant's supposedly not allowed to actually go in there and do it. Like, I have... Obviously, in the event, if it was like me, I have a lot of high-value, expensive electronics right now that someone could easily scalp and sell off pretty damn quickly if I was in that situation myself. Why am I not the one just being, like, why is the police officer showing up telling me to move whatever I want out, and the landlord's sitting there, and then once you're done, the landlord just locks it up and walks away? That's how it should be done. The landlord's the one that just locks it up once the tenant says that they are done. That's how it should be done. But if you're following the actual procedure across the board, no, it's this random moving crew that's just going to get dictated to pick up generic items and generic things in the home to bring it outside and then leave it there.
What would make a lot more sense in terms of this process, like, we understand that the only reason why this is happening, once again, is because they didn't actually get their own stuff out to begin with. We get that. So they had ample opportunity, so if they lose anything in this process, then that's their problem. But here's the thing that makes more sense to us. Why not just... Because the cop told us already that he basically has an hour and a half, 2 hour allotment specifically per appointment. So we had to plan around that 2 hours anyway, so if it would take us that long to get all the stuff out. Why not just do the same 2 hour allotment, but specifically tell the tenant you have 2 hours to get all your crap out? You know, give them a couple day notice or whatever so they can get their own amount of people out there. But like, you have on this day, at this time, 2 hours from this point to get all your stuff out. Otherwise, we were forcefully removing you from the property and you'll never have access again. So basically, it gives the people the incentive to grab all their shit and get out. So now...
Because whenever they leave, you probably won't see it again. And that could be done as simply with a notice pinned to the door.
Yep. And then we never have to go out there to go get it. We don't have to pay anybody. There's no liability issues. They just have to grab their stuff. The only thing that could happen in that scenario, which is part of being a landlord, is that they steal stuff that we provided, like a fridge or something. But whatever, that's part of being a landlord, right? That's not a big deal. But the bigger deal is it's already bad for the tenant, especially if they're in a bad circumstance, right? Like they lose their job or something, and then they literally have nowhere else to go, so they just squat for as long as they can, so they have somewhere to at least, you know, have shelter, and then we're kicking them out and stealing their shit. That just makes no sense.
And then the other thing, too, like he's bringing up the fridge. Okay, in this current situation, that's our fridge. No, that's my fridge. I bought that fridge. Who's right?
Yeah.
How do you prove it?
Yeah.
The police officer isn't the judge there. That's not his job.
Plus,
how do you prove that?
Anyways.
Like that's the thing that just drives me absolutely insane.
It becomes the he said, she said argument when we go to court, and they're all going to be like, well, we don't know. Neither one of you have proof of anything. It's literally just whoever feels like arguing it harder. Nothing's going to happen. Yeah.
The eviction process, and I'm hoping genuinely this is just a Belton County, Belton City issue, because that is absolutely insane And again, I think there's a lot of room there that, again, if it was me personally, if I'm being told by the county that to remove my own tenant, I have to do these processes and I get injured by the tenant stuff, I would be more inclined to sue the county for forcing me to do that instead of just providing them the standard 24 to 48 hour notice, giving them all the ample time. And if they just refuse to abide by the notice, oh well, you chose not to listen, you have to get out. And then I just show up, change the locks, now nobody's harmed, nobody's at fault.
And one final point on this is, so we actually called our attorney on this because we were like, have you ever heard of this? This sounds nuts. The fact that we have to go do hard labor for no reason. And so we had the paralegal actually was the one we were contacting because the actual attorney was busy at the time. And so he wound up calling around just trying to find information because he'd never heard of it either. He's like, this is freaking nuts. He's like, I've been, learning about real estate or being in the field for at least 5-6 years now. And then, whatever time he's been in school. And so anyway, so he calls I guess the sheriff, or I don't know exactly who it was in the sheriff's department. But basically the point is that they told him that the reason they do this specific process is because, quote unquote, they are not a moving company. So they don't want to take any liability. Yet once again, this opens up more liability because there's so much more gray area than versus, like we just said, just putting the notice and making them do it.
You put the notice, you got 2 days. You could literally be taking your stuff and putting it outside within that 2-day period while you're arranging proper
because now
transportation.
They're saying that the landlord is quote unquote a moving company.
Yeah.
What? The logic behind this is so stupid. Anyways.
It's absolutely insane. And I just, once again, man, it's like when it rains or pours, and it's like it keeps piling up, and I'm just like, great. So when we actually have an issue where, because this was fairly civil and whatnot, but let's say in the event, actually that's another thing. What about in the event if I show up, we have a very civil unrest tenant, I get shot?
Yeah.
Because this dude just refuses to sit there and move or work with anything. Great, he's going to get arrested by the police officer there, assuming that police officer doesn't get shot.
Paying for your hospital bills.
Do you think I'm going to sue the tenant for shooting me?
He's got no money.
Or do you think I'm going to sue the county for allowing me to be in that dangerous of a position?
Not to mention, it almost incentivizes you to sue the county because, first off, the guy himself doesn't have any money. Otherwise, he would have paid rent. So, of course, he has nothing. You can't sue him for anything. So, the only person you can sue to actually cover your hospital bills would be the county.
The county or the city. Whichever one's the one that actually is forcing
this. I'm pretty sure it's the city because, once again, we've seen in Anderson City itself a whole different process. So, I don't know if it's a city-by-city thing or if it's actually considered county and that was considered Anderson City. We don't know exactly what it is. Either way, we know we dealt with the Belton Magistrate and then we dealt with the Anderson County Sheriff. Mm-hmm. So, somewhere in this process is where it becomes stupid. And we just know it's one of these individuals. We don't quite understand who exactly it is right now. We'll probably learn if we ever have to do this again down the road and get a little bit more clarification. But generally speaking, somewhere around this, there's a weak link in the chain. Doesn't make any sense.
So now we're going to move on to February. So obviously, as you guys remember from our previous video in January, we were fairly distraught and just incredibly frustrated with the entire situation. And we knew we had to make changes. Mm-hmm. We could not continue dealing with the negative budget that we have. We could not continue operating the park as need be. We would start getting down to the wire of either selling it or slumlording it, getting as much as we can out of it, and then selling it or whatever else. Like, a change had to happen. Mm-hmm. There was no way after the entire situations that occurred that we'd be able to maintain and keep moving forward and following our original plan. Well, we couldn't necessarily come up with the best course of action at first, so him and I decided to do something we probably should have done a while ago, and we actually joined the Upstate CREO, which is a real estate investor group focused around multiple different things here in South Carolina, dealing with real estate.
And to clarify, Upstate, for those who aren't in South Carolina, is roughly the upper third. We're a triangle-shaped state, so put it on the side, cut it in thirds, we're the top third. So that's considered the upstate of South Carolina.
Yeah.
So roughly a 50-ish mile radius in a circle.
So yeah, we decided to go on ahead and join that, and we ended up taking one of the seminars there with people who deal in mobile homes. The whole point of it was like a beginner's thing to obviously talk about like how mobile homes and mobile home parks, it could be very big cash cows to make a lot of money off them, whether you fix and flip them, whether you rent them, whether you own or finance them. And we got the chance to actually talk to some experienced investors there. There was a panel of 3 of them, I believe. These people had like 20 plus years of experience. And we came to the conclusion that the best option to try to stabilize the situation was to actually owner finance the mobile home itself, and they taught us how we can do that. So we decided that we were going to test the waters, and we put up 124 and 118 for owner finance and started advertising it just to kind of see what the interest was. Well, surprisingly, we actually got 118 sold very quickly.
6 days.
6 days from my initial advertising. What we were asking for is 1,500 down, 500 a month. 250 of it would be lot rent. 250 of it would go towards the mobile home for 15,000 total, 0 interest. And our offer, we actually got exactly that, just $200 less on the down payment. So instead of getting a 1,500, we got 1,300, and everything else exactly the same. And then we have also gotten a lot of interest on 124, even with the current issues and the current problems that they have. And this is very beneficial in 2 regards, because number one, the people over at number one, we are now finally bringing in income again off those units that we can use to reinvest into the park to try to obviously finish out what we needed to do. And then on top of it, even when the unit sells, let's say they go through it, they don't default, nothing like that happens, when that unit actually sells, we still collect lot rent, so it still puts us in a long-term beneficial solution, and we don't have to worry about throwing them out or doing anything like that. Like, it's actually a very good position to put ourselves in, and we can use that money to start working on the ones that we have and not have to worry about the other 2 that are already a big problem. So this has been absolutely phenomenal. Do you have anything to add to that?
I do. I guess we're going to kind of add in another point that we're going to bring up later. And the reason we're specifically going this route is because not only do we not really have the budget to actually fix these homes up, but we're also having a hell of a time with our contractor again. Where specifically, even if we wanted to put the money back in, so say we were to bring other investment income like we do whenever we sell other properties that we have in our personal portfolios, say we got like $5,000 available and we want to go ahead and dump it into this house. We can't get it worked on anyways because our contractor has been so incredibly unproductive this month. It is insane. So to clarify, as you guys know, we pay him twice a month. Specifically right now, based off of the fact of the last month where everything got some holds on a couple of the properties, so it was $100 per unit that he's actively working on, but we had to take those 2 off because they can't be lived in. So he's getting $1,100 a month, $550 the first time, $550 the second time. Well, we paid him $550 the first time for this month, and about a week and a half ago, I call in on a couple of the tenants being like, hey, have you guys seen, heard, or involved yourself in any way with the maintenance guy? They're like, no, we haven't seen him in like 3 weeks. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That is so great to hear. And then one of my guys, actually specifically on the day that we were doing the eviction, we had to get a 4th guy, and we didn't have one available, so we actually had to get one of the tenants to help us to do the process. And he told us that his hot water heater had broke like 2 days prior, and didn't let us know until just that moment in time. So we were like, okay, cool. So we wound up taking the water heater out of 118 and putting it in that one. Anyway, point is that didn't get done for almost a week later, and that was the last time we had heard or seen from the contractor. Nobody had seen him, nobody heard from him, he didn't bring any materials by, he didn't do anything, and it was time for us to pay for his second half, and we're like, hold up a second, we're not getting the value of what we're paying for. And so then we're obviously, retroactively looking at everything that's been done, and effectively, this particular project, this, if you remember, this is specifically 130 that we're having most of the concerns on, with getting the water, specifically all the plumbing redone, the bathroom redone, and then running it all back out to the septic line, or septic tank. And he's been on this process since roughly the end of September. It is now the end of February. It has been 5 months. And we were paying more than $1,100 for the first couple months. So we were paying like $1,200, $1,300 for a little while there every month, and then went back down to $1,100 just last month. So he's made like $6,000 plus, almost $7,000, and has effectively done 3 things: half a job of plumbing, a little bit of a clearing in a lot for when we had to get 122 put in place, and fixed like 2 water leaks and moved a water heater.
Man, I wish I had his job.
Yeah, all So anyways, try to reach out to him. He didn't answer right away. Then about 4 or 5 days later, he finally reached out to me, and of course, convenient answer. He tells me that his truck has been impounded for like the 2nd time now, Anyways, point is that he didn't have a vehicle, didn't have access, and I was like, look, don't care, not my problem. I'm not paying you anymore until you literally catch back up what you owe us, because we've technically paid you in advance for the hours that you've actually supplied. So we're not paying you until all of 130 is done, and then if you actually get it complete, which we don't expect you to, then we may work with you again in the future going into whatever the next projects are. However, you're not receiving any funds from us until you've finished your job, because you've already been paid more than the actual job is worth. Because we could have just hired another contractor and paid them like $3,500 to do a complete remodel and had it done in like a week versus 5+ months. And so, anyway, so to back it all back up to the original point of this being why we're in financing, that's one of the other incentives.
I want to say this too. I find it very annoying because as we were dealing with all the problems in January, we obviously talked with him about it. We explained to him the severity of it and what the issues are, and like, hey, this is important. Like, what we need to get things done. We need to get on top of things. Like, we need stuff to start flowing. Otherwise, nobody's going to have anything. The tenants aren't going to have housing. We're not going to have a producing mobile home park, and you're not going to have a job. And what annoys me is the lack of communication after we explained the massive sense of urgency needed on this project and on this job. That's what baffles me about it. But yeah, same thing like what Derek is saying. At least on the owner finance side, we don't have to worry about it. And if, as we're testing the waters on this, if this works out well, we might even consider doing it to some of the other units. As other tenants, if they decide to start leaving or whatever else, we can start doing it to the other units. And then again, we've already done the math. If we keep our lot rent, which again, rents never stay the same, but assuming rents never change for like 5+ years. So if we keep our lot rents at $250, that's $3,000 a month every single month if just all 12 units on that mobile home park are just being lot rented and nothing else. Still pretty damn good. Not as great as we were hoping for, but then again, we don't know what the future could hold, because obviously we could potentially look towards more expansion or whatever else. So now we have some that are lot rentals and some that are actual like rentals again, and we have like better maintenance and everything else that's set up. There's a lot of potential that the future could hold with it, but in its current position, assuming nothing else changes, it's still not bad in the event that it gets completely paid off. So, and
then another thing I was mentioning to Vlad too is one of the key differences here between renting versus owner financing when it comes to the quality of the people that you're actually getting involved with your contract is that when it comes to a renter, there's no incentive or really any drive to actually fix or do anything with the home. So even if they have the skill or the trade to do so, they actually won't be utilizing it to the fullest, because once again, there's no incentive to do it. Versus somebody who's an owner finance person or just financing in general a home, they're going to take more care and time into their project or their craft, because they want to make absolutely sure that what they're providing for themselves is high quality, because they don't want to have to keep fixing something that they broke the first time or whatever. And so the logic is that even when we own a finance, if we find a quality person who's obviously fixing up one of the homes, so say we own or finance 3 of them, for example, and 1 out of the 3 is actually a pretty competent contractor to an extent, or maybe not necessarily a contractor, but at least a handyman of some kind, and they actually do some quality work because they have to fix up the homes anyways to really live in them, then we can obviously offer to that person to effectively replace the current contractor we have now, and now they have the incentive not only to fix up their own property, but then they're also getting paid to fix up their own property with all the other properties they can work on, and they live effectively at their job. So it's like a heavy incentive for somebody to do something like that. So we're actually inviting, to an extent, roundabout and long term, a potential replacement for our contractor anyhow. So not only are we replacing him now because he's not working on the homes particularly, but we're also possibly going to replace him as we find somebody who's better at the job and is willing to take the offer. So either way, it could really beneficially work us out.
Yeah.
And so it could also make it cheaper for us too, because we may not have to pay them as much because they obviously live there. We don't have to pay for like transportation and stuff. So who knows? We never know what's going to actually happen. But generally speaking, that's kind of the route we're going with right now, is to specifically just start owner financing some of the problems away. We're going to try to maintain what we have specifically because we obviously want to continue to take on the larger increase in lot rents, especially because rents keep rising up throughout the state. So it's just more beneficial for us to hold on to mobile homes if we can. However, the more problematic ones, we just don't have the funds or the time or the contractor to get it done. So we're just going to owner finance some of those for now and then figure it out from there.
So, that's everything I got if you want to move on to the budget.
Yeah, so budget's pretty short and simple this week. So basically, everybody and their mom is behind because for whatever the hell reason, I don't know. All I know is I think over half the tenants literally said that they either didn't have the money or they didn't have all the money. Now that it's the end of the month, we've collected most of it.
To be fair, we can't be that mad about it because we weren't entirely sure if they were even going to be allowed to stay there. So
No, sure,
I do understand. We were a lot more lenient with this situation than we usually are on it because of obviously all the issues that did come about in January, and now we've transitioned over to figuring it out, doing catch-up payments,
But at the same time,
else.
they didn't actually move anywhere. So what the hell is that money? I mean, they still earn the same amount, so they're not going anywhere. So what do they just blow it all on a lottery ticket, hoping they can make it big before they leave?
Fair enough.
So, anyways, point is that basically, like I said, about half the tenants legitimately fell behind. We haven't received payment from one at all. No, two of them at all. And then the rest, like I said, as of now, are fully caught up. Either they already paid on time or they paid over the course of the month and some late fees. However, we're expecting the same problem going into the next month because the ones that just caught up recently, they don't have the money coming in next week when they're due again, so they're going to be behind again. And so by the next video, they'll probably be all fully caught up again, but still technically behind. So one of the benefits of that is at least we're collecting late fees to offset some of the losses that we had from the loss of 124 and 118th income. The other thing is that we're not actually having to do anything with most of these homes because right now everything's just kind of stable. So we don't have to like rush out there to fix, for example, like a leaky toilet or something or anything like that because one, nothing's really a problem in terms of like the actual home. So we don't really have a big repair budget. So really we're just kind of taking in some excess money that we normally wouldn't be getting and offsetting some of our costs. So our budget's actually not too terrible, surprisingly. So with that being said, we are still technically negative because of all the property taxes and crap that we were behind on for everything else, plus previous debts and things. So, but we could have been way worse, is my point. We could have been way, way, way worse. So overall, let me get to the budget. Basically, as far as tenants go, like I said, most of them have finally caught up. We have not gotten payments from two of them, being specifically 138 and 134. And then we also have gotten a partial payment from the person that owns the separate home that we first got into, being 946 John Hart. They only paid 100 of the 460 that they owe. So we're basically down 360 there, the full 25, the 425, and then any late fees in that as well. And then we're technically also down $40 from one person's late fee. They still owe us that much. And then another person owes us $60. So basically another $100 they owe us from late fees. Outside of that, everybody else is fully caught back up and that's paid. And then on top of that, like we mentioned earlier in this video, we sold 118 and we got a total down, or up front I should say 1,800, being like Vlad said, we got 1,300 down, and then we got the first month's rent / owner finance fee of $500, and so we got 1,800 up front. So with that being said, with all the people involved, we've gotten a grand total of $5,085 in. Now, with that being said, as I mentioned, we're still negative because we had the $1,953 that we owe for the mobile home park. We had a one payment for the contractor, so we technically saved money there too. Don't forget, we normally would be paying them too, so we saved $550 on one of them. And then the other thing, the real big thing, is we had in January, if you remember, a $2,000 water bill, and then on top of that, we had some property taxes that we put on the same credit card, plus our regular recurring debts. So overall, our total cost this month was $6,180.16. So in grand total, we were negative $1,095.16. Not that bad, actually. Because technically, if we just do another owner finance, sell one of the other homes like we did, if we get another $8,500 down or something like that, positive again. So we're good. Not to mention, going into next month, because they had to pay $500 a month, we've increased our monthly by $500.
And I do want to say this.
For now, at least.
Derek and I were talking about it after all the issues with January, after trying to figure out what to do throughout the month of February, and we briefly brought it up in January, but I think it's worthwhile to say now. We both believe it's actually better to start looking at outside acquisitions, so buying homes and new acquisitions outside of our current mobile home park, to then hopefully have enough money from that, from all those acquisitions that we're bringing in monthly, to then start funneling in parts of it back into the mobile home park, as well as finally start paying ourselves back out for the egregious amount that him and I both invested into it to obviously keep everything afloat. And this is the unfortunate thing that we were talking about last month, where we were trying to figure out how to do it. But at some point, you got to cut your losses and you got to keep moving forward. It almost sounds weird. Like, it's like you're already in debt. You're going to go even more debt to solve your debt problems. Yes, it can be done. It's just you have to be very careful and very smart about what you're doing to bring in more income to offset everything and actually level it back out, because we are sick and tired of seeing the budget going negative.
Think of it like this, right? So say you have two options available to you. You have one bank account that if you put your money in for like a savings account, you can get 2% a year, right? Or you have another bank account over here that if you put your money in, you get like a stock market or something, you get 10% a year. Right now, the mobile home park effectively is at 2% versus another acquisition could effectively be 10%. Now, of course, we know that the mobile home park could easily be the 10% or higher, but right now it's not, and we don't have the funds to get it from point A to point B. However, if we instead invest into the 10% one, take that compounding interest and profits that come from either sales or whatever it is, so with those homes, and then we then dump it back into this one, being the mobile home park, and we get it up to 10%, now we're good. So now we're still making profit now, and we can utilize that profit to then turn this one back into being more profitable. Because right now, we don't have enough funds to really get this 2% anywhere, except maybe 2.5%, 3%. And we're still significantly slower than if we would just refocus, retarget, get back into something else, get more money, and then a larger influx could come in faster.
Let me say this. With the Koreas and everything else like that, we actually have a very interesting opportunity to do a complete asshole route. We could find somebody within the Korea that would be willing to fund us getting all new mobile homes across the board for that entire mobile home park, skyrocket our rents up to like 800 plus, replace every single one of them. But that would also mean that we've displaced every single one of those tenants that are lower income and will have nowhere else to go. So that's why the better option is to actually refocus on something else. Because like Derek said, yes, we can bring it up to that 10%, but there's also the human cost that comes factored in with it as well that I'd rather avoid. I'd rather not have to do that. Don't get me wrong, business is business. If our hands are forced, we have no other option, we're going to end up losing it if we don't do something completely different, then yes, we have to follow through. But we're not in that destitute of a situation, and it makes no sense to be that cruel while obviously just focusing on the profits and then continuing on from there. That's another reason why acquisition will be better, but that does usually tend to mean that we're not, obviously, like the nicer improvements outside of just keeping the status quo as it is right now. We're not going to be doing anything nicer or furthering it anymore until those outside acquisitions are able to help refund it back in.
Yeah, pretty much we're putting the mobile home park on like stationary, right? We're just kind of keeping it afloat. We're going to do, obviously, the things that we have to finish up doing, which is getting the plumbing finished at 130, getting the underskirting put up under 130, and the underskirting put up at 104. But outside of that, basically the conditions of the homes are the conditions of the homes. We really can't do much more than what we've already got.
This also means cutting out gravel and things like that as well, where we'll only gravel if we absolutely have to, if there's like pitfalls or whatever else. We just we can't keep dumping our money into this.
Yep. So basically, we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna retarget and try to get some other we're gonna get some other investments, and then say those investments produce us like $10,000 or $20,000. We could then take that $10,000 or $20,000 and then just all at one time re-gravel the entire driveway, or all at one time come in with a contracting crew and just remodel all the homes, or straight up to start replacing from that point on, but maybe not have to raise the rates as much. So, for example, if we were to have to go ahead and get a loan for it based off the cost of the alone, we might have to raise the rentals to $700, $750 per new unit we bring in. But if we have the money on hand to be able to bring in, maybe we don't have to bring up $550, $585. And so now these people that are currently paying like $425 might be able to afford that, but they probably won't be able to afford $750. So that's some of the things that we're talking about.
That, and on top of it as well, with this current situation at least, because him and I also discussed it, we're pretty confident that this coming summer we're going to have to raise the rent just to keep everything stable because of these water bills that are just absolutely egregious and us not getting told about them. But it's not going to be much. We're looking at doing it $450 total. This is going to be the new price. So it's from $425 to $450. And then that should hopefully help stabilize it, plateau everything out. And then once again, like as tenants leave, as tenants continue on, we can focus on actually replacing or reinstalling or doing something else different with that unit, whether it's complete and total overhaul renovation or if it's actually like replace and remove or whatever else. And we'll have to just kind of play it by ear because it obviously depends what the situation is. But we do think that's going to be the best decision. And that's exactly what we talked about in our last video. That's all this situation has done, because while we're going to make sure that their livelihood and their situation doesn't get any worse, we also can't keep trying to make it better at the same time, because otherwise we're going to bury ourselves, and before you know it, there won't be anything left there. So, well, that's pretty much all I got on that.
That's pretty much it. So outside of that,
the update's over then.
Yeah, you'll see us in the next video where you'll see if we continue to owner finance, if we convert into rentals, or if we get some new acquisitions. So you'll see what we do.
Yep.
So with that being said, appreciate it. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.
Peace.
Peace.